People are still joining, but before I pass it off to our guest speaker to share a little bit at the start. So my name is Cameron Ripley. I am the broker owner of Purpose Home Lending, NMLS 2613494. My own NMLS is 2314695. And we're going to be talking about building wealth with real estate. This is a presentation I've done several times, but kind of made some tweaks and changes here and there. We have a workshop that we do as well, where we typically just go over more a deep dive into actually deals. People can message certain scenarios and we kind of talk about it and what that might look like. We're not here to sell any coaching program, or I'm not here to sell any coaching program. This is just what I've actually seen from clients who are serious about investing, and even clients who started from really much of nothing and already have a pretty good portfolio of real estate. And just kind of what I've seen as someone who's a loan officer. So I only get paid when deals close and people are successful. And obviously, if you're not successful and you don't and you can't grow a portfolio because the deal didn't work out, well, that's on me as well, for not helping you properly. So a lot of this advice is coming from a place of what I've seen work and what I've heard people online say that I don't believe works at all. So I did want to pass it off. We do have a guest speaker from Kickoff. So Hassan, if you wanted to share and talk a little bit.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Cameron. Before we start, I would like to ask one survey. And the survey, there's one question basically, and it's going to ask if you have heard of a credit building company before. So if you have not, just say no. If you have and have heard of its name or not, just there are 4 single choice question selection that you can go select one. It was one question. So please fill that in. As soon as you fill that in, I would like to quickly share my screen and tell you what you are and what you're presenting.
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, so I'm presenting Kickoff today. So Kickoff is a credit building company. It's a credit building company that's going to enable you to build credit history and low cost, no stress, very fast, very quick. So I personally, a couple of years ago, I had this problem that I wanted to get a loan, but I was not able to get a loan. I didn't have the credit history. I didn't have good credit score, so I found Kickoff. Even before I'm presenting it, I found Kickoff, and I was able to pay it. I think that time was $2 or $5. For a few months, I paid it $5 per month, and I was able to increase my credit score by 100 points, 150 points. It was incredible. And then after a few months, I went to one of the lending companies and told them, "Hey, I want to, get a loan." And they said, "Your credit score is good." I was like, "Yeah, okay." I did a cheat sheet with Kickoff. So Kickoff is one of them, and it enables you to. It also gives you the ability to report to all 3 credit bureaus, and yeah, helps you to build credit score, and then helps you to get the loan. As you know, a good credit history and good credit score will open doors. So that's it. Thank you very much. It's called Kickoff, kickoff.com. I'll ask you another survey at the end. I appreciate you, Cameron.
Awesome. Yeah. I'll probably be talking about some of the importance of, especially from the mortgage side of things, as I go through the presentation. So, yeah, to really dive into it. One of the things with this seminar that we really like to talk about, and people watching the recording or people that are online, when you're going to build wealth and you're thinking about real estate, there's lots of different avenues of doing it. And if you find yourself on the internet, especially social media, kind of browsing and searching different content, I always warn people that, a lot of that content, it's funny because I follow a guy on Instagram who his whole platform is making fun of this kind of stuff. But you got to be a little leery whenever they start to talk about the coaching programs and whatever it might be, because if it was so wildly successful, all of their effort would just be put into that, not necessarily helping people. And, just something to be leery about. But people like us in the industry, including Kickoff, who kind of know that, hey, we're more of a support role as you build that versus, hey, we just want you to pay us for some advice. That's where the value really comes in. But I hear a lot of mixed things. People think, well, okay, in order to build wealth, I either need to start off wealthy and start investing in apartment complexes. I need to buy the cheapest property in the middle of nowhere. Do I need to do a turnkey property where someone else handles the management? What does that look like? What does it even look like if I were to flip a property? Is that something I should do, shouldn't do? And I really believe, and this is where the presentation we really where we started off, I almost said kick started off, but where we started off is it really can start down to your own home. And building wealth has to do with the longevity of whatever investment you have. So this isn't a talk to say you shouldn't invest in the stock market, in the S&P 500, whatever, treasury bonds, Bitcoin, whatever. But I do know a good gamble and a good way to mix up your portfolio is with real estate. Land is limited and values tend to go up. Now, there's some things people do or don't do that does hurt the value of their property and hurt their overall wealth. But one of the things I like to start off is, if you're someone who is coming from nothing, right? I own an apartment complex, or I rent an apartment, and I'm trying to build that portfolio of real estate. This is where you need to start talking to someone like a mortgage broker, who typically, and it's funny that we have, Kickoff helping us out with this presentation. Typically, a lot of our advice is, where's your credit at? And it's so funny because so often people will say, if they say, I have no idea, or how do I check? It usually isn't as good as you would want it to be. And our recommendation is to go to a company that is tied directly in with the bureaus in order to give you really accurate information on how to improve your credit. And people will pay thousands of dollars to credit repair agencies to improve their credit, or they'll join a coaching program where they get these weird tips and tricks and advice, but nothing is tied directly to their own current situation. And boosting your points 10, 20, 30 points, depending on the price range, I've seen it save people thousands of dollars, and I've seen people be able to buy amazing properties. The most recent success story I had was, guy's credit score was 560 for some reason, and it wasn't anything crazy. To be honest, I believe it was him and his wife took some advice from Dave Ramsey, and they kind of twisted it a little bit, and they literally stopped using their credit card, but they just threw it away and never paid their bill and kind of forgot about it, and their credit just took a dive. They got presented an opportunity to buy 80 acres out here in California with a house on it, with a pretty small amount down. It was an amazing deal because the seller, it was 2 houses on one lot plus 80 acres right next to a military base, so there was a lot of room for housing to be built. Long story short, he went with a company where he just got a brief rundown on his credit. In 3 weeks, because that's when all of his credit card companies reposted to the bureaus, his score went up 80 points. And he not only locked in that loan, because he didn't qualify before, but when he locked in that loan, actually what I originally quoted him, I think the new quote for the same interest rate saved him like $8,000, because he was less risky to lenders because his credit was a lot better. So there's a lot of value with that, but it starts by talking to someone like me, and that way we can give you the advice, we can steer you in the right direction of, hey, this is where you want to start in order to be the most beneficial. A lot of people don't know how much they need to put down, how much they should put down. You don't want to go with a company that, just says, hey, whatever you want to be pre-approved for, you should. Like, a lot of times when we talk to someone, it's, your situation is your situation. Let's make a plan around your situation to either make it better or to fit, a property that fits in your situation, so you don't feel stressed, so you don't feel stressed and you don't feel limited on what you can do. But a lot of times people will come to us and they'll either think that rates are too high, their down payment's too high, the down payment requirement's too high, or whatever it might be. I would just say always look at whatever options are out there and always have a chance to have a talk with someone. You never know where rates could be at. You never know where your rate could be at, because maybe you have been a part of a company like Kickoff and you've improved your credit, and you might have heard from a friend that they got 6.5, but you're qualifying at 5.5 because your rate's so much better. Or whatever the situation might be, there are always a lot of options out there, including down payment assistance programs. Now, this is not a video. I know I'm in California, and we have the California Dream for All. This is not a video to promote that. I think it's a interesting program. And if you want to keep your bills the exact same all the time, maybe that's a good program for you. But it eats into your equity, which is probably the opposite of eats into your appreciation of your property, which kind of is your equity as well. And so that is kind of the opposite of today's conversation. So for a lot of people, when you're looking at buying a property and you say, okay, my goal is I want to build a portfolio of real estate, whatever that might look like for your end goal, whether you're passing on generational wealth, you just want to buy and hold properties, you want to replace your income because you haven't been investing in retirement, and this is going to be your retirement plan. Or you're really handy and so you feel like there's a benefit to that. A lot of times this is going to start with your own property, your own home that you live in. I encourage people to look at any type of option out there. A lot of our clients that come to us who say, okay, I may not have really big income for the area I live in, we try to be really strategic about finding them duplexes, triplexes. I had a young guy and his brand new wife buy a fourplex in Oakland that they never would have been able to afford. But because 3 of the units are so high cash producing units and they're living in the 4th and able to say, hey, this is a residential loan, they got a killer deal on an FHA loan. Did require 5%, not 3.5% down for their specific situation. But we were able to make it work. And that asset, that fourplex, people would kill for that. I mean, it's valued. I think the appraisal came back at like 1.3, 1.4 million, something like that, where most people would die for a situation like that. That thing will grow and last them forever. And so it's always good to talk with someone and to really figure out your situation and a good starting point. I have had a lot of people who are contractors who actually are tired of fixing other people's properties. They want to get into flipping. And the ones that own their own house and can pull from that equity as kind of a business line of credit, they tend to get the best deals and have the best resources available when it comes to flipping homes. So whatever it is, for me, I recommend starting with your own house. Now, top real estate myths and busts that I think a lot of people got to get their mind around and over. And once again, for anyone watching or on the call today, when you get on the internet and you're looking at, okay, hey, who am I supposed to learn from? And you're getting advice from people who are posting a lot of different stuff and then selling coaching programs, I'd be very cautious of some of the advice you'd get. Doesn't mean you can't learn some valuable tips and tricks. Just a lot of the myths I have tend to come from those people. Building wealth, right? People think, to build wealth, you have to start investing. Many people start with just a little bit of capital, from down payment assistance programs. I had another client that in Tennessee, first-time home buyer, got a down payment assistance program for a new build house. It ended up appraising 6 months later for way more than what they bought it for. Don't 100% know the reason why. I think the area just developed really quickly. The market picked up and they had so much equity, they were able to refinance and take some cash out to make some improvements and do some other things. And so you don't have to start with much. They literally came out of pocket, I want to say $600 total. And that was tough for them, but they managed to make it work, which is pretty funny. But most people do think, and it kills me that they think you need 20% down in order to buy a house. There are times, investing in properties that you might need 20%, but that doesn't mean you have to start building your portfolio with 20%. I'll get people all the time who will say, well, hey, I want to buy this apartment complex. How much do I need to put down? A lot of times an investment property, 20, 25, 30% is probably going to be what you need, depending on the situation. Really hard for a lot of people if they've never bought a house, if they're not doing a 1031 exchange from another property, which I'll talk about more. But to start, that doesn't mean you necessarily need that 20% down. Okay, a big one for me is a lot of times people will buy the cheapest, they'll think that they should be buying the cheapest properties in the middle of nowhere America, and that is the way you start. Listen, I'm in Sacramento area of California. We get a lot of people moving from the Bay Area, the San Francisco Bay Area, paying cash for homes, and everyone whines about it and complains about it. I've got a lot of clients and real estate agents in Texas who whine and complain about people from California selling their house here, moving to Texas, paying cash for homes. Look, if the value of wealth and the ability of those people to sell their house and then pay cash for the next one, it's not because they're starting buying off in the cheapest area. A lot of what I talk about when it comes to building is not paying down your mortgage. It's being in an area in a market that has appreciation. Being in an area in a market with good job and economic growth helps the appreciation go up, right? If average incomes constantly increase by 5%, values tend to increase by 6 or 7, if not a little bit more. When you're talking about 5% appreciation every single year over, a 10-year period, so 5% each year over a 10-year period. If you start off 5% on a $100,000 home, that growth over that 10-year period is going to be pretty insignificant versus growth on $1 million home. So just because you're in a market that's really expensive doesn't mean that that shouldn't be an option you're trying to consider and make happen. It actually might be more of a reason to push and make it happen. Like I get people all the time in San Diego who call me, they want to buy a house, but they're kind of complaining because they think, man, my market is just so unaffordable. And here's my thing is you're in a great market with a ton of growth. You're buying something, if you can just make it work, once you buy it and you lock it in, you can always refinance and lower that payment later. But once you've locked it in, you've locked in that price as well. So when that value keeps going up, that's going to be an asset that's going to give you a lot of options in the future. Now, flipping is a funny one because it wasn't something that I necessarily got into offering loans for, but I ended up becoming the savior for a period of time and some of the loan officers in my company when it came to flips, because people were only wanting to work with hard money lenders. What a lot of times I was seeing the same scenario play out where a flip coaching program comes through town. They had this huge marketing push on social media. They're hard salesmen. I mean, brutally hard salesmen talking people into getting into flipping. And they tell people, okay, use our preferred hard money lenders. So they're making money on both sides. Use our programs. So they're making money in their program. And these people are getting themselves in this tricky situation where they're being told, okay, the only way for a deal to make sense is if you're making 40 to 50% or whatever the percentage is. And so there's things when it comes to flipping that I really encourage people to talk to us about. Just because, you're getting your money for a flip doesn't mean you have to get a hard money loan. There are plenty of other loan options available for people. And sometimes they have better terms, sometimes they don't versus someone's private money. But having a conversation can help you out a lot. I've had flipper clients who were taught in their program, hey, I don't think this investment's going to work out because of the interest rate and the fees, and I'm trying to get a deal. And I would look at it and say, well, I can get you a better deal, but why did you think that their interest rate and the fees they're charging made it so this isn't a good deal? Because I'm looking at the price of the property you're purchasing it at, and I know that area, Folsom, California, it's a great area. You could sell that house for a lot. And they said, well, it's not my 35% return on investment. I said, okay, what is your return on investment? They said 30%. I was taught a minimum of 35, otherwise it doesn't make sense. I said, okay, but 30% for the home in the area you're looking at is $150,000. You're saying that one deal you're going to make 150, and that seems like a bad deal to you because it's not 35%. And the guy looked at me and we made the deal happen. And it's just something that we've run into time and time again, that when it comes to certain loans and certain programs, just feel free to find a representative, someone that's in your corner that actually can coach you through the common sense side of things. Buying close to home, there are a lot of great out-of-state markets, a lot of great property management companies. It can be tricky, but sometimes people think I got to be able to be right next to my home. Sometimes people think I have to buy in another market. there's a reason for both. So having that conversation, just putting yourself in a box makes you a lot more limited. And then, always on call. One of the things I'm going to talk about is, as you're looking to build wealth in real estate, one of the biggest things I find people complaining about and commenting on is, hey, I never want to deal with tenants. Like, yes, people are people, and you're technically somewhat in a customer service role when you own a property. I would not say that owning a property is a total passive income approach to anything. Nothing's totally passive. Most of the horror stories I've ever heard was somebody bought the cheapest property that no one has ever cared about in the middle of nowhere, and they put someone in there who clearly can tell no one cares about that property, so they don't care about the property. That's the first biggest mistake I see most early investors make. The second biggest one is they tend to rent it out. Whenever I hear a horror story, it's a friend of a friend or a friend or a family member. And almost every time someone tells me this horror story, how they trashed the place, they got into drugs, it was destroyed, I say, how did you come across that tenant? They go, oh, they were a friend of a friend and they were willing to pay the rent. Well, that was your big mistake. Maybe you should have done a little due diligence on that renter. And so I encourage anyone who's looking into doing this, there are good property management companies. You've got to be careful of who you choose and make sure you're interviewing them on, what they do, what their standards are. Do they send you monthly reports on the house and at least drive by to see the outside condition? How do they qualify people, and so on and so forth? Not just they say, oh, I can get the highest paying tenant in here. Well, that's probably not your best option. Steps to buying your first property. Everyone's situation is so different. I actually really liked that Kickoff was able to come and join, because honestly, when people call me and they say, hey, I've already found the property, my blood boils a little bit, and it really worries me, because there's less options I can now present you. When you come and you say, these are the goals I want to have in the future, and I want to start by talking to you, it really helps us analyze what to do next. Many, many times I've had people go to companies like Kickoff, where they're tied directly with the bureaus. They get people's information that is specific to their own credit report, not just a weird simulator that kind of just says, hey, lower your credit card balance down to a third of the usage. That's a lot of theory, but it's not specific to you. And they've managed to boost their credit as time has gone up. And I've had to tell people, had that tough conversation, hey, look, your goal was to build a portfolio of real estate. Stop financing every little thing on a credit card in your life. And I know that you really want that jacket, but do not put it on that credit card, because I thought this was the goal. And we had that conversation. I had that conversation with a client who is a physician, I want to say about 1.5 years ago, and she just bought her 4th property and is now building another property, a 5th in Mexico. So it's important. The benefit isn't just, oh, let me learn tips and tricks on my credit. It's getting notified. Hey, this is where your credit's at. Hey, your credit's improved. Like I said, I don't know why no one's run this statistic, but I have found that whenever people call me and they say, hey, I want to buy a house, and I say, well, where's your credit at? If they don't know, it's usually bad. If they ask, how do I check? Because they don't know, it's usually bad. People that without batting an eye spit off numbers, it's usually pretty accurate. There is something about keeping up and keeping on track of your credit, because it's a game, and if you play the game right, your score will go up and you'll get much better options. Next, in the home buying process, it's getting approved so that you know all of the numbers. How much are my closing costs? How much is my down payment? What is my payment? I would ignore interest rates, but making a plan on what the interest rate is. For instance, if your credit isn't amazing and it doesn't look like that we're going to be able to improve it, but you need to buy a house in the next month, I've had this happen where, okay, I know you want to build a portfolio, but buy the house, stay in it until we can refinance. A few months after we refinance, if you want to start looking for your next property then, great, but that will give us time to boost your credit, but you can lock in a property now, get that rate lower, get a much better mortgage payment, so that when you put in a renter and you switch and buy another property, you're going to cash flow faster. Shopping right for the right property. I will say that unless if you're planning on flipping a property, trying to build a lot of sweat equity is not something I would recommend to a lot of people, but it's definitely a conversation that I have to have on a case-by-case scenario. For instance, got a young guy who's a contractor with his family, so they have a lot of people in the trades. He has a lot of extra income coming in after buying this property that he can definitely do a lot of renovations. So for him, it made sense. Had another person who's handy, works a full-time job with 2 kids under 2, and thought, hey, I'm going to buy a property that is a total fixer and be able to fix it up. I said, well, I'd be really honest about your capability of doing that with your 2 young kids and your full-time job. Instead, buy something that's already done and hold on to it, maybe make 1 improvement, 2 improvements, but as rates go down, refinance and then move on to the next one. And so everyone's a case-by-case scenario, especially in the market that you're in. And then make an offer and negotiate. This is, once again, you want to have a good team behind a real estate agent and a mortgage broker or loan officer where you can talk to them and say, okay, how much should I be negotiating or not negotiating? But you got to feel like, because not every agent has your best interest in mind. Some just want to get a good deal, and they will not explain to you. You'll find yourself being told, hey, you shouldn't negotiate that, but there's no explanation. If someone came to me and they said, hey, I'm going to be offering $60,000 less than their list price, and I say, hey, I wouldn't do that, I would only offer 10 less, I better explain why. And if it's a good reason why, then shut up and listen to them, because your goal is that property. But if they can't explain why, it's because they don't want to ruffle any feathers and they just want to close a deal. It's my biggest advice when it comes to real estate agents. When I was an agent, I loved to negotiate. I loved helping people get a good deal. But when I switched and became more of a mortgage broker, because I felt like there was a bigger need on that side for my services, I felt like there were a lot of agents out there that just didn't like to ruffle feathers. And I thought, man, you're making a lot of money on this transaction. Why are you so hesitant to just ask for a 1% credit from the seller? We're the only offer. There's no other offers. Why are we not negotiating? Why would we be giving them their list price? So just a piece of advice is I would also not go necessarily directly to Zillow to request an agent. I do a little bit more research on your own. And then, yeah, close and move in. Obviously, there's a lot of paperwork. You're going to have inspections, all kinds of fun things. Now, scaling, flipping versus renting. So, when it comes to, there's 2 different sides when it comes to investing in real estate. There is flipping and then there's renting. And when it comes to flipping, there's all kinds of things you can do, right? There's a lot of different exit paths, but you got to be really tight with your contractors, your laborers, so that and if anyone wants this, they're welcome to email me, Cameron@purposehomelending.com. We have our own flip calculator. It's nothing crazy. It's just you put in, if you walk into a house and you say clearly new floors, you put in dump fees, demolition fees, you put in the new floor costs, the labor, from every little thing, and it tells you your overall cost, including the cost of the loan, and so on and so forth. The reason why you want to do that versus there are other flip calculators out there from a lot of these flip coaches that are total BS. The reason you want to do that is you're going to have a lot more accurate numbers when it comes to flipping properties. Now, once again, glad we have kickoff here, because a lot of times we get people who start an LLC and say, oh, my LLC, we're going to run their credit. Not how it works. Someone with 25% ownership or more typically has to have their credit run. Once again, if you're going to start an LLC, find someone with good credit or figure out a way to build your own credit, and it'll just help you so much more. And it's not that expensive. It's just, if you know that wherever you're going to is pulling right from the bureaus and actually getting accurate information, the little tips and tricks that they give will have a dramatic impact. Now, people looking to build a rental portfolio don't necessarily have to be flippers. Now, sometimes we've had clients where analyzing their goals, analyzing their current situation, the fastest, best way to do it is to start with a couple flips. And the reason why, because we had this out in, I think it was Ohio, where they had about 250, or they had about $400,000 to put down, and there was a $2.8 million property they were wanting to buy. Or sorry, $3 million property they were wanting to buy. So they didn't quite have enough for the down payment plus the closing costs. Maybe it was 5 million. I think it was 5 million, but it was cash flowing like 10%. 10% capitalization rate. Great rate. Now, it was a lot of units. I want to say it was like 63 units. For us and them, my conversation was, look, you've got enough money that I think it would be worthwhile doing some standard flips where you can build your portfolio of contractors in the area. Because if you just go and you buy this property and you're just saying my full-time job is going to be managing this, well, buying a $5 million property and then adding your contractors to fix things and emergencies and all this stuff, it's going to be really overwhelming for 63 units. If you can build that trusted network, doing a few flips here and there until you get that down payment, it's going to help you so much more. And it did. They were able to run into contractors they hated and they would never use again. And then they had really loyal ones that they pretty much told them, look, this is what we're buying, and we want you to help us, whenever we have maintenance fees. And it's nice because it kept those contractors busy and their employees employed. So, but there is a difference between flipping and renting. Sometimes it's you buy the rental property, as tenants move out, you renovate it, make it really nice for the next tenant because that justifies the increased cost and it gives them a good reason to treat the property well, not slapping lipstick on a pig. That's totally different, but making it nice. That's why I chose that picture on the right. People will pay more for a good property and they tend to take care of it better when they can tell the owner actually cared when they made the updates. Once you increase the rent, the value goes up dramatically. Then you can talk about either keeping it and borrowing equity, or you can sell it and do what we call 1031 exchange to a bigger property. But there's reasons why you might do that. Now, choosing your growing model is something we're pretty much already talking about. I like people to sit down with me whenever we make these plans so we can really analyze, what kind of income do you want? How passive do you want it? If you're talking about flipping properties, how do you get to more of a sustainable model? And what are you really looking to do? Or are you just trying to flip a property every which way? So you always want to have a property to flip. That can put you in a tough situation. When it comes to rentals, that's where we really strive a lot more. Flipping we do as well, but a lot of that is you just getting a good deal somewhere, to be brutally honest. Whereas the rental side, that's where we can really talk about, hey, the more doors you get, the less fluctuating your income is. Plus, the higher your income is, if you don't have a huge income goal, you probably should, because then you can start introducing property management companies that handle everything for you and make things more passive. How to add value to property, kitchens and bathrooms are huge, flooring's huge. A lot of times people will buy properties, and I've heard this from some pretty big real estate coaches out there that, they replaced the roof and thought, oh, I added value to the property. And that's a pretty basic feature of a house, is a functional roof. That does not add value to the property. It is just a necessity. So adding value to property is a lot of the cosmetic stuff. Possibly adding bedrooms, depending on the market. And this is why we talk about the market. There are markets that call for more rooms and more livable separate spaces. San Diego's one, Los Angeles, San Francisco. There's some areas in Oklahoma I know about. It's all about, how do I get more livable separate spaces? Whereas in certain areas, actually like where I live in Roseville, California, some parts of Texas, people want their own land. And so if you can find a way, instead of adding an apartment over the garage, instead you're adding an ADU in the backyard and you're splitting that backyard, but everyone has their own private yard. There are certain areas that that basically is what is called for in order to get a lot more rent. Energy and efficiency. Yeah, that's kind of, once again, depending on the market, you can get a lot more value for your property depending on, solar, things like that. We've had tenants, or we've had people looking to buy properties that do that. It's not super important, but I would say it's lower on the list. And same thing with landscaping and curb appeal. Once again, a lot of what I try to teach people, from my experience, if you care about your property and you don't choose the cheapest labor every single time, people notice that, and they tenants and renters, and they tend to treat it better as well. Same thing if you're a flipper and you're trying to flip a property, ones that sit, it's because of that. They didn't put any care in it. Now, building a portfolio, this is where I try to teach people, look, a lot of what, especially an older generation, a lot of what they're told and what they're taught is you want to pay down your loan as fast as possible. You want to get the 15-year, the 30-year. I mean, I think it's good if you have a high interest rate, but for instance, my mom had gotten to a point where, she was she bought a house with other family members. They wanted to move. They didn't want to keep it. She didn't want to sell it at the time, but she pretty much had to. She had to buy another house. She was stressed out because she wanted to be in town close to my kids, her grandkids, but she had to buy a higher valued house, and she thought, I'm never going to be able to pay this off and retire. I got to just keep putting extra money into the house so I can pay it off. And I said, Mom, your interest rate is freaking I think it was like 2.6 something. And I'm like, why would you try to pay that off? I remember your financial advisor saying that right now you're getting 6 to 8% annual return on your investment. Instead of putting money into your house, put money into your investments or something else. And the reason why is, the more money you put into your house, yes, you have equity, but equity is not free. I know that there are a lot of coaching programs that say, don't leave your equity there. That's free money. It's not effing free. Sorry, but it's not. If to take money out, you got to pay a cost of some kind. You're selling your property, you pay a cost. You take a home equity line of credit out, that costs money too. So it's not free money. Now, where I find people have the most value and the most equity in their property, because I do get the clients whose parents pass away, they paid off the mortgage, but they never put a dime into fixing up the property. And so the property sits and it takes forever to sell, and it sells for a lot less than most homes in the area because it's not updated. It's been maintained, but it's not updated. Instead, if they would have put more effort into updating it versus paying off the loan, I would bet money most of the time they would have had more value in the property and more equity. So one of the things I encourage is usually putting more value in your adding value to your property versus paying down your mortgage as fast as possible. But then leverage. Everyone's situation is a little different. You buying your first house, if you're not ready to invest in additional properties because you're building your career, that's perfectly fine. You owning a house now adds value 5 years from now. So even if you say, well, I don't know if I want to have a portfolio of real estate in the future, but I'm pretty sure I do. Buying something now, let's say 5 years from now, you decide to open a business. There is your business loan. If you decide, okay, I do want to build a portfolio, you can do a cash out refinance because that's what I did. And that's how you buy your next investment property. So there's a lot of things you can do just with regular equity in a property. Depending on someone's feasible, and this is where I try to really have pretty honest conversations, because I've known a lot of people that back in 2008 lost all their properties. And the reason why is they were just a little over leveraged. Their goal was just buy properties. Instead, it should have been buy a property, but let it cash flow pretty quickly and save that money. So in an emergency, you have an emergency fund specific for that property. Once you're set, then move on to the next property. Problem is, if you have 10 properties, if 5 of them are vacant for 3 months, what does that do to you? Can you handle it? Can you not handle it? Because if you can't handle it, there's a problem. And that is more of the honest conversations I have to have with people looking to build a portfolio. We're not running one right now, but one of the things we had to look at is people were trying to ask, why are we not buying that $5 million property? Instead, we're buying $2 million properties. Every area can be a little different. And that's why sometimes it makes sense, depending on your risk tolerance, to buy properties in other markets, because you never know when things change. Let's say all your investment properties are in Oakland. Oakland decides they want to implement some weird landlord laws, and now you're screwed over. It would be good and behoove you to be diversified and be in other markets as well. But once again, that's more of a, you really start growing, we'll have that honest conversation. My slides are going to freak out. A big one I like to talk about is the 1031 exchange. When people buy property and you go to sell a property, you need to talk with a 1031 exchange company pretty much right away. There are rules. Basically, your equity and your appreciation are subject to capital gains tax. In order to not get taxed, you really, people call me and say, I just sold my property, I want to do a 1031 exchange. I said, well, that's interesting. You just sold your property. Who's holding your funds, just so I can contact them and get an idea of the timeline. And time again, they say, I have my funds. Well, you're screwed. I mean, I'm not an attorney, an IRS and tax attorney, but you're pretty much done. You can't, from my understanding, you cannot touch that, but maybe do a little digging. It's pretty inexpensive though. You know, the nice thing is, instead of paying capital gains or even income tax on that accrued interest, I go and I find another property. There are timelines, but as long as you have a good plan in place, it'll make it a lot easier to buy that next property. Now, when it comes to flips, you do have to be a little bit careful, because I've had where people only flip one property a year, and it's hard to show that that's a business versus 2, 3, 4 properties. So sometimes people just want to flip one, and then they just hold on to the property. You know, I'll get real estate agent clients. They come across a great deal, they flip that property, but then they never flip again. It can be hard to say. You're probably more susceptible to capital gains, because that's not a primary purpose of your business. But constantly finding a new property to move that cash to, that's a whole nother story. So it's a good way, especially as you're building wealth, to keep passing on. You're not paying taxes, it's you're deferring your taxes until you sell that next investment property. And also putting all these properties in LLCs and trusts and stuff like that, pretty easy to do, but that's another conversation. Investing in markets with growth. So this is probably the biggest thing, and one of the last few slides we have is looking at areas with jobs versus looking at areas with good prices. We were licensed in our mortgage side, and we can do investment property loans in like Alabama. And not to say Alabama's bad, but I was getting a lot of people looking for the $90,000 properties and less, because they thought, well, it's $90,000, I can buy my first investment property. Okay, but what jobs and like who can afford to pay rent? What is the rent there? And we really came to the conclusion that, yeah, you could buy a fourplex there, but your cash flow, it was actually going to be negative compared to buying a single family investment property somewhere in California with the same amount of down payment and requirements. So I would really put a lot more focus into areas with good job growth, businesses that actually are going to be around for a while, you know, different things like that. Not just, oh, this is a trending market where people are moving to escape California. Montana falls victim of time and time again, where it's so beautiful in spring and summer. People leave California, but then they can't handle the winter and they sell, and the market becomes kind of stagnant, which will hurt your wealth building growth. Popular trends. This is something we help people out a lot, because it's easy to do this kind of a deep dive. Infrastructure projects can help you identify, okay, this is going to be a good market if I hold out in this area for 5-10 years. You know, for instance, we have this area, it's right off of Highway 99 and kind of I-5, called Plumas Lake. Properties are really cheap. It's right on the highway, easy commute to Sacramento, but they don't have a grocery store. Like, I don't understand. It's been years and they do not have a grocery store, and their values have stayed pretty stagnant. And I really think that's why. And there's no real there's no talks about it. No one's making proposals to build grocery stores, and I don't understand why. But the second someone does, investors should be buying up all the homes in that area. And then also rent to value ratio. There are major cities where people think, oh, it's unaffordable to live there. However, sometimes when you look at the rent to value ratio, there are just like Austin, Texas, Denver, Nashville, kind of San Diego, not maybe not as much, but a lot of those areas, certain parts of LA, younger people are moving there. They're getting their first big job of some kind. They're making good money, but they're not ready to necessarily buy, but they're willing to pay higher rent for a good place to live with a lot of accommodations. There's a lot of value in that. I mean, shoot, Denver they just built an apartment with an outside halfway through the building park. I don't know how it's going to last in the winter time, but once again, one of the huge, this slide got messed up. One of the big things. What I'd say for anyone watching the recording or online, if anyone's interested, feel free to reach out, always schedule a time. But I do want to kick it back to, sorry, I was looking right at your name, to kick off, to kind of end our call here.
Thank you, Cameron. I had an amazing time listening to the amounts of beautiful data and beautiful teaching that you have on wealth building. Definitely, real estate is a huge avenue to make that happen. I personally am getting my own home, and as you mentioned, credit building is a huge in doing that. And we're sponsoring, Kickoff is sponsoring this event. So I would like to, before we go, I would like to ask another survey. It's a simple question, a couple of questions, the survey. So if everyone here just take 45 seconds and complete these few questions, I would be really grateful before ending up the meeting here. So the name was Kickoff. So if you remember the name, just say yes and put the name as Kickoff there inside the survey. Yeah. And tell us if you would consider telling your friends and consider telling your friends about building credit history, and if you refer Kickoff to that, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Kickoff. If people don't remember the name, then I did not. Then no one listened to me.
Yeah. So the Kickoff, you kick it off with Kickoff. You kick off your credit building with Kickoff. That's how you do.
Yeah, we do a lot of business owner events, and I will say for business owners, because we've gotten this a lot. Oh, my business. A company like this is great as well. I think every business owner, if they're not monitoring their credit, I don't know what they're doing, but yeah.
I agree. Even for Buzzable, we're at Buzzable. Even for us, it's huge. Like, it opens up doors that we never knew it existed. And you mentioned in wealth building with real estate that you would save a lot of money, and you can pay for houses that you're not able to pay. And yeah, so it's I personally have seen how it affects my life. Just paying maybe $5 per month, you cannot even imagine that what can do with it for you. So
absolutely.
thank you.
Well, thank you for joining. And I look forward to seeing you at the next event or anyone else. They can check us out on Eventbrite or shoot, where's the other platform we posted on? I actually like the other one a little bit more. Sorry, my computer's a little slower now. But anyway, all right, well, thanks, Kickoff.
Yeah,
Sam.
my pleasure. Cheers. Thank you, Cameron.
All right,
Take care. Looking forward to this. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.